Om Saharam. Everything that I am and have is yours, Swami. Please speak through me. So Gurupurnima is of special significance in our own lives because in 2007, do we have the PowerPoint up? Okay, I don't see it up here, but that's okay, perfect, I think. Yeah. So yeah, in 2007, Tamish and I had the unique opportunity of performing at the World Youth Conference in front of Swami, and you'll see that picture is actually of us. At that time, we did not know each other. We were complete strangers, and we were well behaved. We did not speak in the ashram. But subsequently, 2 years later, we were supposed to get married in Puttaparthi in March, but things just kept happening and everything got postponed. And it just so happened that the only date that the Panditji would give us was July 7th to get married. And sorry, July 8th. So the Mehndi ceremony, when we sat down for the Mehndi ceremony, I realized, I was like, oh, this is Gurupurnima. I was like, oh, that's unusual. And then, of course, exactly and almost a year ago was the very first time that I had the wonderful opportunity of bringing my kids for their first service project to this beautiful, magnificent abode of Swami's love for the first Guru Purnima function, and I guess the first not completely public function at Sai Premanilayam. And since then, Premanilayam has really become a second home. So the next slide. And you can just add all those, just because it'll be difficult to coordinate otherwise. So I've always thought of Swami as my personal trainer, more because, having come from a family of two conventional religions, being a Sai devotee has been very different, a very different experience, It wasn't like going to a group class or going to a mass class or going to a gym on your own. It was just this constant guide and somebody who gave me individual experiences. And I was thinking maybe if we had lunch after this and everybody wouldn't be so sleepy, you would be able to share an experience of yours with somebody you were sitting with at lunch, and you'd realize that yes, you have similar experiences, but they're never the same, right? And we all know this. We all know this, that all our experiences are 100% individualized for us. And hence, he really is your personal trainer, right? The second thing that you really have to have in a really good personal trainer is that you have to be able to trust your trainer, right? Because if he tells you to lift the dead weight and you're like, not going to do that, right? You have to know that he knows what he's doing, and you have to be able, so he has to build that trust within you. He also has to be the perfect example, right? You don't go to a personal trainer who's not in the perfect shape themselves. And we all know that Swami is always the absolute perfect example of everything all of us can only aspire to be, right? He also has to create change, right? So if you go to the gym, you don't want to come out a year later exactly as you walked in, right? So he has to somehow figure out how he's going to create this change for you. And then how does he do that? So he has to motivate you, whether you want to do it or not. He has to have the right tools, right? And he has to constantly give you feedback and guide you along the process. We can move to the next slide. Yeah, so if you look at the top left corner in that slide, that was 1997, and that was kind of the spiritual equivalent of where I was. I was very close to, as Brother Greg said, what is your greatest fear? Having gone through life, never being even aware of God or actually denying God, right? And then 2007 was again the picture of where we were at the World Youth Conference together. So that was a pretty big change. And so to kind of just bring you to speed with what was going on in my life, I just wanted to briefly tell you. So I was born and baptized Catholic. And I was a devout little Christian child. And then when I was 8, my parents separated and I moved with my mom, who was a Buddhist. Around the same time, I began to question a lot of Christianity. And I was like, how come there's so much suffering in the world if there's God? And this led me down a pretty, steep precipice of me eventually being like, I'm convinced there's no God, right? And so by 14, I was a die-hard, very unhappy atheist. In 1997, so in the bottom left corner, you'll see that's me with my godmother. And so during my whole childhood and youth, and especially during these, difficult times, she really was my anchor. She was a real life coach. She taught me a lot of things. She was also a British diplomat. So I guess, she kind of knew had a lot of human wisdom. We never talked about religion, even though she was my godmother. But in 1997, she was diagnosed with metastatic lung cancer. And my whole world kind of crashed, right? And so we went to England to see her, and she could barely transfer from the chair to the bed. And it was a truly devastating time for me. It was a time when it really was the darkest year of my life, right? And so, we had, as I said, we'd never spoken about religion. On one of these days that I'd gone to see her, and I'm like, you're going to get better, Aunt Leanna. And just of note, Leanna is actually named after her. She looked at me and she said, pray to Guru Baba. And me, atheist me, 18-year-old who thought I knew everything me, looked at her and I was like, you mean Sai Baba? And I was just almost horrified. And she said, and she just didn't reply. She just looked at me. And I was like, you're joking, right, Aunt Leanna? And she still didn't reply. And so I was like, okay, that was weird. And so anyway, fast forward a couple of months, I had to go back to Sri Lanka to take my A-level exam. And anybody who's from South Asia, India, Sri Lanka knows that your A-level exam is like the highest stake exam that you'll ever take. Now, you usually don't end up traveling across the world, going and seeing a godmother who's dying. Like, usually this exam, you have to be kind of in the prime state of mental and emotional health. And this was far from the case. So I come back to Sri Lanka, and I had since then stopped going to the shrine room. I would stopped praying. I had stopped, chanting any of the Buddhist prayers that my mom and I used to chant. But then because she said this, and this is kind of stuck in my head, I was like, maybe I'll just go to the shrine room and, see if there's a picture of his. I didn't know who he was. So I go and I find this book. So my mom's shrine room is truly Sarva Dharma, right? Anything anybody gave us went into that shrine room. Islam, Muslim, Hindu, Christian, everything was in there. So somebody at some point had given us a book of Swami and a packet of vibhuti. And so I took the book, I cut the picture off, put it on the wall. And I was like, Andina said, pray to Guru Baba. I don't know why. I don't know how to pray to him. So we saw this packet of vibhuti. And the packet of vibhuti, it said, Om Sai Ram. So I was like, oh, this must be how you pray to him, I guess. And so I started chanting the Buddhist, Pirith that we call it in the evenings. And at the end, we would say, Om Sai Ram, Om Sai Ram, Om Sai Ram 3 times. Obviously with no conviction, with clearly no faith, because I didn't even know who he was. And so then every morning I would wake up trying to study, right? And I had 2 months to do this very overwhelmingly difficult exam. And I was just truly overwhelmed. So in the morning I would wake up panic-stricken, confused, like my head was like a washing machine, just churning. I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do. I couldn't figure out how to study. I didn't know what to do. And I didn't want to be there. I wanted to be in England with my godmother who was dying. It was just terrible, terrible frame of mind. And for some reason, and I don't really know why, I just said Om Sai Ram. And it was this instant effect that it had on me, that it was as if I was shot by a tranquilizer. And I was stone cold calm, like all that panic, the confusion, it was gone. And I was so calm and I would know exactly what to do next. So I was like, oh, chemistry, physics, multiple choice questions, essay. So my whole day would just be as if somebody just came and organized it for me. I was like, oh, that was weird. And so, of course, the next morning it happens again, panic stricken, confused, same terrible, all these emotions and thoughts, 200 thoughts going in my head. And then Om Sai Ram. So this happened every day. And so, of course, every morning I say Om Sai Ram again, not knowing who Swami was, never knowing the significance of those words. So then I kind of feel like it's like I found some magic word, it's like abracadabra, Om Sai Ram. It's like, oh my God, it's like instant. It was just absolutely instant. It just worked every time. Now, interestingly, it was the similar experiences my mother was also having kind of in parallel. And so then we get curious. We're like, who is this? Like, so we start finding out, ask some friends. So we find out, oh, there's a bhajan, and so we did end up going for the bhajan before I take my A-level exam, a flower falls. And I'm like, oh, that has to be a good sign. I mean, of course, now all of you know that, but back in 97, I did not know that. And so our lives completely changed. We were literally, I think, from age 8 to 18, our lives were like a boat that was just about to capsize every 6 months. And then suddenly everything just calmed down. The waters were calm. Everything just had direction. And during about a few weeks after I finished my exam, my godmother did pass. And a couple of days after she passed, I had this dream. So the dream was, there was this big hall with metal doors, and I opened the doors, and it's kind of like a morgue. And there was a metal stretcher that she was laid on, and it was her body, because obviously I couldn't go to England. And so I take her right hand and I'm crying. And then brown hand takes her left hand. And when he takes her left hand, she wakes up. So in the dream, I say, oh, and he made you better. We have to go thank him. And so in the next shot of the dream, you know how dreams are, we are in this hall with stainless steel tables. And she kind of goes to the end of the hall and she says, I'm buying lunch for everybody. And I woke up and I thought, what was that dream? That's such a weird dream. Like, makes no sense. I didn't really understand any of it. So anyway, about a month later, just because of on a daily basis, everything was just changing. We had all these experiences where every time like if I was staying in the bus, if I said, oh, waiting for a bus that just wouldn't come, I'd say, Om Saram, the bus would come. Much like Brother Krishna said a few days ago, I would, as I got on the bus, there would be a packed bus. The seat next to me would be empty. So I would sit on it. Then a couple of times I'd be like, I get to go by car, I'm young. Maybe I should see if somebody older should sit here. So then I get up. But the minute I got up, and let somebody else, the next seat would get up. Nobody would want to sit. It was almost like I was being rewarded for good behavior. I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. So this constant, grace that we both suddenly started experiencing, we're like, we have to go to Puttaparthi and thank him. Of course, we thought we'll be able to just go and thank him. We hadn't been there before. And so in Puttaparthi in 1997, I think it was around October, we did go to Parthi, and I went to the South Indian canteen for the first time. And I went down to put my plate and I turned around, and the hall that I saw in my dream was the South Indian canteen. And so I was like, oh, okay. So I know that my Aunt Liana is with Swami and he's taking care of her and it's all good. So this goes on. And so a lot of this slide is going to be, how Swami gave me what I wanted, right, at the beginning, because I was very, very far away from any of this. And so then I got into medical school, and we have this exam called the second MBBS exam. And that's in your second year of medical school, and it's the hardest exam you'll take. It's also the exam that your name is plastered in front of the dean's office. So everybody knows if you're, smart or not smart. And I knew a lot of people seniors in medical school. So studying for this exam, I was having like my throat was getting constricted, and I was like, Home Sir, I'm sorry, this is not good. By this time though, I was, at this stage where like all of us, we constantly talk to Swami and call on his grace. But then I thought, you know what? It's all good. I'm going to go for bhajans on Friday evening, and a flower is going to fall, and he's going to take care of the results, right? Like, I knew exactly what I was going to do and what he was going to do. Of course, you can never predict, right, Swami? So Friday evening, they impose curfew in Sri Lanka, and so I can't leave the house till Sunday night. So I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I can't go. I can't go to the bhajans. I can't, like, flower's not going to fall. Like, what am I going to do? So I'm sitting in our mandir, like Sunday night, totally panic stricken, no sign from Swami. I'm like, Swami, what am I going to do? Oh my God, please give me a sign, give me a sign. And I take my hand, I was just touching his picture that we had got from Parthi. And I take my hand, I'm like, oh, what is that? And it was Vibhuti. And when we looked at the picture closely, right around the frame of this picture that we had bought from Parthi, there were these tiny little cones. Like, there's no way anybody could have even done it. Like, it was just these tiny, like almost like those dupe cones, but they were these tiny cones right around the picture. So needless to say, I'm sorry, I guess I should have said I did get into medical school, of course, right? But Swami, of course. So, that alone was a miracle. But, second MBBS came, Swami's grace, right? Swami gives me a first class, makes me top the batch, gives me all distinctions, all of that, et cetera, et cetera. But sometimes we don't always realize how much he's doing. And so then third MBBS comes on. And so this is all these are all experiences. I wish the youth are here because there's a lot of, when all during my years of studying. And the third MBBS comes along, and again, same, like, oh, Swami, give me a sign. I'm sitting in the mandir and before the exam. And as I looked down, there was a little gem. And I was like, oh, okay, thank you, Swami. This is a sign. And then I was getting a message, I had to wear it for the exam. Now, this was Friday night. By Monday, I have to get this somehow made into a ring. So I have a cousin who's, got a husband, his brother-in-law who makes jewelry. And I was like, oh, can you make this? But then in my head, I'm like, Swami, if you really gave this to me, then I shouldn't be paying for it to be made, right? How we bargain with Swami, right? And so Sunday night, I was like, I really need it. I was like, I told her I'll pay you anything. Just please bring it to me by Sunday night in the form of a ring. So she brings it to me Sunday night and she goes, Anush, last birthday, we couldn't give you a present. So this is our gift to you. You don't owe us anything. Years later, I would find out that stone, because I didn't get it looked at, obviously before, but randomly I found out that stone was actually a Raksha Gomeda. And I was going through the period of Rahu. So any of you who know astrology know that that's the exact stone that I was supposed to wear, right? So next slide, please. So yeah, Swami says, this ego exists in every human being. As long as it remains, man cannot achieve anything good nor secure God's grace. So you'd think that when I'd had all these experiences where Swami is clearly showing me that I could not have accomplished any of this and that it is all his doing, that I would have the intelligence to realize that it was not me, right? But ego is you have to watch your ego. And this is kind of a lesson that I learned. And the next few slides will be a lot of the lessons that I have learned. So between second MBBS and third MBBS, we had an exam called third MBBS part 1. And that is the easiest exam anybody will ever take if they do an MBBS exam. It's parasitology and microbiology. I knew the entire parasitology syllabus by memory. But of course, still, I was sitting, studying, I was a little scared. I was like, oh, Swami, I still know because I got this for second MBBS. Now I have to get this for part 1, how we all get caught in that trap. And I was praying to him, and then I went down and I came up, and on my desk, there was nothing in my study. It's just my desk. There was something that was kind of flicked on my desk, like powder, like dry rot powder. So I was like, oh, what is that? Like dry rot? Like, how come there's dry rot? Like it's only on my desk. So I wipe it away. I was like, it's not talcum powder. There's nobody to put talcum powder on my desk. So then I'm sitting there, nothing. I go down, get a cup of coffee, come back. Again, it's there. I'm like, wait, what? So then I look at it closer. I'm like, oh, no, it was Vibhuti, right? So I go, oh, okay. So now this went on every day for about a week. And I go down. If I'm sitting there, there's nothing. If I go down for 10 minutes, and it's only my mother and I, so there's nobody there to play practical jokes, on me. I go down, come up in 10 minutes, just this little bit. It's just like somebody just does that, and that, just on my desk. So I started collecting it. This went on for about a week. And now I'm going to say something that most of you are going to feel is like blasphemy. But one morning when I woke up, I thought, as I was waking up, that, I get the first classes and distinctions because I study. If I don't study, I won't get first classes and distinctions. But when I get them, I attribute it to Swami. And then immediately I thought, oh my God, what did I just think? Like, no. Everything is because of you. Everything is because of Swami. Everything is because of Swami. And from that day onwards, there was nothing on my desk, right? It all stopped. There was no powder, no dry rot, no vibhuti. And so then I was a little uneasy. I was like, oh, this is not good. Like I've got about 2 weeks more for this exam. But I was like, but you know what? I know the entire syllabus by memory. There's nothing that can go wrong, right? Wrong. So that oral board exam, everything was great. Everything was fine. I'd get into the oral boards, and then I get into a really bad argument with one of the examiners. And as I keep arguing, I can just see that distinction fly away, right? And so sometimes when Swami keeps giving you and giving you and giving you everything that you want, right? You start owning it and being like, oh yeah, that's me. Of course it's me. It's everything that I've done that gets it. But you don't realize that it's all him, and we don't, sometimes it takes a mistake on your part for him to teach you that. So next slide. Do we have, oh, I'm sorry, I'm not seeing. Is that slide 5? Never say no to Swami. Okay. So why, if anybody asks me anything and it's to do with Swami, unless I'm physically at another spot, I will not say no. And the reason is, before that third MBBS exam, the Gomeda, exam, and the exam that he did give me fantastic results. The Friday before, I did get to go for a bhajan, like I always, tried to do before those big exams. And one of the YAs approached me and said, we have a medical camp on Sunday. Would you, Brother Mano actually said, medical camp on Sunday. Would you be able to come? And I thought about it. I was like, it's a 21-day exam. I should be rested. And, I don't really want to do this outstation trip, like 5-hour drive there and back and be exhausted. And I should probably study a little bit on Sunday. So I was like, Sairam, I don't think I can do it. Saturday night, I ended up getting a pretty high fever. All of Sunday, I had fever, so I couldn't really read anything that I had planned to read. And all through the entire 21 days, I kept having this very high grade fever. Nobody really knew why. I kept getting blood tests. And on the last day of the exam, it went. It was done. There was no more fever. I still don't know why I had 21 or 22 days of fever. And of course, Swami says yes to everything. So the exam results he took care of, but he taught me a little lesson, right? So if Swami asks us anything, unless you're physically at some other location, I don't think we should ever say no. Next slide. All right, so this, where Swami, I learned the lesson where Swami cares more about our effort than our talent, right? Was at the World Youth Conference, the same World Youth Conference that I just showed you in 2010. We both had the opportunity of playing, but I had, they tell you to send them a CV of like your music experience. So I used to play the violin very, very seriously, to the point that I was almost like, a semi-professional. Played it through many years, almost every day. And so there was maybe a page of like all the different, orchestras and concerts and recitals and all that stuff. And then there was the Western classical music, which was about maybe half a page. And then 2 lines at the end, I said, learned flute under, this teacher who, of course, nobody in India would know. And it was from 14 to 16. So I was like, okay. And so then the choir director writes back and says, bring your flute in case, you might be able to play. I thought, I'll bring my flute in case maybe somebody else who doesn't have a flute can play my flute. But of course, I'm going to play the violin or I'm going to sing. And so I show up and they tell me to play the flute. And I'm like, no, I don't play the flute. I played the flute last when I was 14. Like, no, this is not what I came here to do. And she was like, no, we have 2 violinists and we don't need violin. We have a flute. We have all these flute parts and we don't have a flautist. So you have to play the flute. Oh my gosh, that day I was screaming at Swami, like in my head. I was like, what are you thinking? Why would you make me play the flute? Like, I can't do this. So I was kind of really yelling at him. And then we had to go to the N9 building for some, meeting with one of the, I think it was like one of the SSSIO, organizers. And as I was just like intensely yelling at Swami, and I turned to the right, there was this picture of Swami like this, So I was like, oh, okay, fine. I shall stop yelling and I shall start practicing. And so it took 21 days. So our days were long at the youth conference, 6 a.m. until 9 p.m. And then from 9 p.m. to midnight, I would go to the room and I would practice and practice and practice and practice and practice and practice, right? And so this is one of the pieces, though. Right? So after many, many hours, many days, many nights of practice and practice, finally we were at Gurupurnima in Sai Kulwant Hall, and I was sitting there, and that was one of the pieces, but there were many, and then that I could now manage to play. And then I realized, of course, Swami knows what I can do best, right? We can do everything in the world out there because of his grace, right? Like he knows what I can play best. He knows what I can do best. He doesn't care about what I can do best. He cares about how much I'm willing to put in for him, right? And so if I had played the violin, I wouldn't have had to practice. I'd have just been like, oh yeah, give me the music, I'll play it. But when it was the flute, that was a completely different story. I had to practice really, really hard, and I had to put in a lot of effort. And that's all Swami cares about. And so then I realized, I was like, oh, I get it. Okay. And so next slide. Yeah. So he's always with me, and we all know this, right? This is no news to any one of us who's sitting here, right? This is why we are here. And he says, you are my very own, dearer than dearer to me. I will protect you as the eyelids protect the eyes. Why fear when I am here, right? And this is just day in, day out, every minute, every single day, anytime that we have some moment when we are just, hopeless or helpless or, just can't figure out what to do next, he's right there. And we all know that. But I had to choose a few experiences that I felt were, really kind of resonate, brought out this message. So 2009 comes along and I have to I'm thinking of coming to do my residency here. And I had to take this exam in New York City. And so it was the step 3, I think it was step 3. And so I was on this 30-hour flight to New York. And on the way, my mom before I left, my mother said, get a cab from the station to my friend's house. And that was about $50. Now, you know how I always try to be too smart for my own good. I sat and I was like, okay, did the math. And I was like, okay, if I get the subway from the station to my friend, it'll be like $5. And then I can buy my mom a gift out of the money that, she had given me. So I had figured out how to get there. I get on the subway station, and then, I get on the train. And then somehow the trains don't look quite how like they were supposed to. Like the numbers were a little different. So now it's like 10, 11 o'clock at night, New York City subway station. I'm like straight out of Sri Lanka, right? And with luggage and everything. And I'm like staying there. I can't remember. It was like 53rd station or something. And I'm like, train isn't coming. So I'm like, Om Sai Ram. Om Sai Ram. Om Sai Ram. Swami, Om Sai Ram, Om Sai Ram, Om Sai Ram, Om Sai Ram. Where's the train? Like this is supposed to be like instant, immediate, right? Like this is usually what happens. So I'm like, oh my gosh, what is going on? Why is this not working? And so then finally, like half an hour later, a train comes. I just get on the train. I don't even look at the number. I'm like, just gonna get out of this station. So I keep hopping on and off trains. And now I find myself at the opposite end of New York City. So then now it would cost me $150 to come to my friend's house. I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? This is just so bad. And then I realized, oh my gosh, it's because, and I was like, it's because when I'm in Sri Lanka, India's right there, right? So if I say Om Sai Ram, Swami can help me. But now I'm at the opposite end of the world and on the underground. Like, of course, how can Swami help me? Like, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, if Swami can't help me, now I know, right? Because now Swami has shown me that everything that I have is because of him. There's no way I can do anything because everything that I've had is because of him. So I was like, okay, I cannot come to America. There's just no way that I can come to America because I'm not going to have his protection. I'm not going to have his grace. And that's it. So I figured that out for myself. And then I like looked at the subway, realized that there were many lines that were closed. And so finally figured out how to get to my friend's place because now I didn't have the option of a cab. And so when I figured it out, I finally got on the train that would take me to my friend's place. And so I get on the train, and then this very disheveled man follows me, and he has this like long overgrown beard, kind of looks like a sannyasi, or like a yogi. And he has this Peruvian flute, that they have with like, and so the train starts going, and he stands right in front of me, and he plays this. So he keeps playing it, and there's more to the song. So I listened, and I was like, oh, I know that song. I'm like, oh, World Youth Conference, like from 2 years ago. And I'm like, oh, because it ends with Swami, Swami. And so I'm like, oh. So like he's just looking, he stands in front of me, he's like looking straight at me, and he keeps playing. So I'm like, oh my God, he's just like bringing me this amazing message that he's not too far away. Like America Underground is still approachable. So I like grab my bag, pull out $10 because that was as much as I could probably afford. And I give it to him, and he just looks at my hand, and he just walks off the train, and he didn't take the money, of course. And I was like, oh, that was really weird. But needless to say, I ended up coming to America because obviously nowhere are you away from him, right? The other experience, I'm going to skip over one of the experiences, but another experience that I had, it's kind of a little humorous. And also, I think I hold dear because it was after Swami left his human form. So in Boston, we had scheduled to have an all-night Akhand Bhajan on a Saturday night for Swami's, when Swami was sick, for Swami's, recovery. But actually, before that Akhand Bhajan actually happened, Swami attained Mahasamadhi. And so we all went to this Akhand Bhajan, and it was like 2 o'clock in the morning, and this was after the Samadhi. I went to the restroom, and so every time I see the thread in my salva pants, I always think of this. But I was in the restroom of course, in a Western, it was in Boston, so like that you understand what the restrooms are like. Go to the restroom, and then the thread in your pants, it went in. And I'm like, oh, it's like 2 o'clock in the morning. What am I going to do? I can't tie it. I don't have another safety pin. I'm like, okay, what I need is a safety pin, but where am I going to find a safety pin in a Massachusetts, Boston restroom, right? I'm like, oh, it's 2 o'clock in the morning. We live too far from where this was to go back home. I'm like, this is terrible. Like, my pants are going to be falling for the rest of the night. How am I going to keep it up? This verbal diarrhea that goes on in your head. And so then I came out of the restroom, and as I came out, on the sink was a nice big safety pin. And since before and after, I have never seen a safety pin in an American bathroom. Just saying. All right, next slide. Okay, so this always respond in love is an example of something that I learned actually from a side, where Swami says, your life is my message. And it was from a student of Swami's. Maybe Swami actually came and showed me by example of his, but it was in Vrindavan. In 2005, Sri Lanka was hosting the Vesak, the Gurupurnima celebrations. And there was a long line for food because the canteen was closed. 3 o'clock in the afternoon, hot sun, like 30 people ahead of me. And I was a stickler for like lines. I don't like it when anybody breaks a line. So I was standing in the back of the line when two men come and they try to cut the line. So I'm with my YA friend. I had just joined the YAs, and I was like, can you believe that? Just look at that. Can't you see, like, there's a line, like, can't you see that? But I'm scolding them, but not fixing it, not talking to them, just yelling about them, but to my friend. And then from behind me, this tall lady, she walks past us, and she very kindly, with just so much love, goes, Sairam, the line is there. And I looked, I was like, oh, wow, that is so different to me. It's like you see like light and day, and you're like, wow, that's very different. And of course, my friend who was a seasoned, SSC Sai devotee was like, I'm sure she's a student. She's a student. And see, that's how a student is. They have, and I was like, what do you mean a student? It's like Anandapur. I was like, what's Anandapur? And then she goes, and she was actually a student. But it was just a lesson to me to change and to not respond or not even have that anger. Next slide, please. Please let me know if I'm 5 minutes more. Okay, I think. Okay. All right. So complete surrender. I think I'm going to just give you one of these experiences that I have. One of the experiences that I was going to share had to do with my career, which I'm not going to talk about. But I'm going to talk about the experience that I had with regards to my body. So in 2014, we were in Massachusetts, and I was sitting on the couch, and I just had my hand on my neck, and there were these huge lymph nodes that I felt. And I have felt those lymph nodes, and they never feel good. And I've always felt them in patients with cancer, right? So they felt like cancer lymph nodes. They were these rubbery, matted lymph nodes. So I was like, oh, that's not good. And so I go see an ENT, the whole workup, and everybody's like, this is lymphoma, right? And so I was just waiting on the biopsy results, but like then all the workup up to that point was like, this is lymphoma. So after 4 days of sitting on my couch, at this point, I wouldn't yell at Swami. It was more like, why? Why? I'm not a bad person. Like, why would you do this to me? And then, or why would this happen to me? Not do this to me. Why would this happen to me? I think I had this realization that no matter if you're a Sai devotee or not, whether you believe in Swami or not, you will still get sick. You will still die, right? But would I have ever changed any of those experiences? What Swami does is he makes it tolerable, makes it bearable, makes it more of a lesson, right? And changes you in the process. And so after that realization, I was fine. I was like, it doesn't matter, whatever it is, Swami, the diagnosis or whatever, it doesn't mean as much as how you respond to it. And so it ended up not being anything. It ended up being Kikuchi disease, which is rather rare and people will have to Google. But yeah, but that was, and so then next slide, please. So Swami as my constant companion. This is an interesting experience. In 97, if you remember when I said I went to Parthi to see Swami, I would be in these lines and wait, and like I was, like right at the back. And after doing this every day, day in, day out, I was like, in Sri Lanka, they were like, oh, you'll get an interview, they'll talk to you, Swami will do this, Swami will do that. And you'll get Padhanamaskar, you'll get Vibhuti, and like none of this was happening. I was right at the back of the hall, like every day diligently going early, staying in the line, nothing. I'd get like line 16, line 20. And so on all these occasions, there was this maybe 12, 13-year-old girl that came as part of the delegation from England. And every day I would see her, she would just have this beautiful smile on her face, and she would be reading Swami's book, and she just pure bliss. And she would be there early. And so after seeing her on the third day, I was like, okay, Swami must have talked to her. Swami must have given her Padhanamaskar and definitely would have given an interview, right? And so I tap her on the shoulder and I was like, has he talked to you? And she goes like this, and she does this. And I said, no. I mean, like interview, Padhanamaskar, like, like touching him, talking to him. And she just smiled and she went like this. And at that time, in my very unevolved self, I thought, it's okay, Swami. If you haven't talked to her, it's okay that you don't talk to me, right? But it took me a good 10 years to understand what she meant. And next slide, as the years kept going by and the 10 years that I was talking about, somewhere in those 10 years, like Sister Jan said, meditating is listening to Swami. Somewhere in those 10 years, I actually started hearing him, because I was constantly talking to him, but of course not giving him a chance to listen, right? So somewhere in those 10 years, he would have to keep saying the same thing many times so that I would stop talking and listen. But, I would actually start hearing it. And so then I realized the tools that I had practiced, especially from 2005, when, I was the year that I didn't do anything. It was between medical school and internship that I just lived in the Sai Center. And implementing these tools was what made me listen to Swami. So subsequently, even though we went like 8 times in a year to see Swami, I was perfectly happy at the back just seeing him, because I knew I could constantly hear him, be guided by him. And so it was service, surrounding yourself with Swami's words, on your nightstand, in your restroom, like wherever you are, like discourses in the car, bhajans, and meditation. So Sister Sureka started this wonderful initiative of, chanting Swami's name and Namasmarana. It's the first thing that made me a Sai devotee, right? And so it's the power of its, the power of it should never be underestimated, right? And of course, Jyoti meditation, but I don't think I'm going to have time to do the guided meditation. All right. Sai Ram.
Sai Ram would like to thank Dr. Anushka, for a fabulous talk. She's taught us a magic word. That magic word being Sai Ram and getting us through anything. What an incredible person she is, with so many skills that not only in medicine, but in music. Baba says the human body so filled with skills, so capable of great adventure, is a gift from God to each of you. And all of us have so many skills we don't even think about to use. This body has to be used as a raft on which you can cross the river, that you can cross this never calm sea of samsara, or change, that lies between birth and death, bondage and liberation. Awaken from this primal duty, even when your physical and mental faculties are keen. Awake when even you have the power of discrimination that is sharp. Do not postpone the launching of the raft, for it may become unserviceable soon. It may be burdened with illness, so that all your attention will have to be spent on its upkeep. Think of the incomparable joy that will surge within you when you approach the shore of liberation. So something that's going to help us approach the shore of liberation is our young adults music program that they've prepared for us. And this is one of those things where I should talk less, because now we should get going and do a quick sound check. Bear with us for just a very brief sound check, and then it will start. Once their program ends, they're going to go into closing prayers. We'll try and have them on the screen so you can see the flow, and that'll be a wrap. Thank you so much. The fabulous Gurupurnima. Sai Ram.